When I uncovered my husband and his mother's $80 million money laundering empire, they made their move, trying to kill me with poisoned food at a family dinner. But I outsmarted them, escaped through a bathroom window, and lived to fight another day. The very next morning, I unleashed a revenge so ruthless it turned their perfect world into ashes. My name is Maya Reynolds, and if you had told me 2 years ago that my life would turn into a battle for survival, I would have laughed. Back then, everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. I was 32, living in Austin, Texas, and married to Ethan Carter, a man I believed was the love of my life. He was everything I had ever wanted: charming, successful, and attentive, or so I convinced myself. I worked as a marketing professional at a firm I loved, and Ethan was a rising star in the tech world, running his own software company. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple. But as I'm about to tell you, appearances can be deceiving. Things didn't start falling apart all at once. It was subtle, like a slow leak in a boat that you don't notice until you're sinking. Ethan's mother, Catherine Carter, was the first crack. She was a formidable woman in her late 50s, always immaculately dressed and oozing sophistication. Catherine was well known in Austin's elite circles for her philanthropic work, but behind that polished exterior was a woman who liked to control everything and everyone around her. From the day Ethan and I got married, she made it clear that I wasn't one of them. She didn't say it outright, of course. Her disapproval came in backhanded compliments and subtle exclusions. I tried to brush it off. Ethan reassured me that Catherine was just old-fashioned and that I shouldn't take it personally. But as time went on, I began to feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Catherine had a way of making decisions that should have been between Ethan and me, like what vacations we took or what charities we supported. The worst part? Ethan always went along with it. The first real sign that something was wrong came during one of Catherine's infamous dinner parties. It was an extravagant event with important business contacts, and I was excited to attend. I spent hours getting ready, hoping to impress her guests. But when Ethan came home, he casually informed me that the dinner was just for close business associates and that Catherine thought it would be better if I didn't come. I was humiliated. My own husband didn't stand up for me. I tried to push the resentment aside, telling myself that marriages had rough patches. But the exclusions kept piling up. I wasn't invited to family gatherings, business trips, or even casual lunches with Ethan and his mother. It was as if they were building a world where I didn't belong. Still, I never imagined how deep the betrayal ran, until I stumbled upon a clue that changed everything. It started innocently enough. Ethan had been working late for weeks, claiming he was preparing for a big software launch. One evening, while he was out, I decided to tidy up his home office. That's when I found the first red flag, a stack of financial documents tucked away in a drawer. They weren't related to his company, at least not directly. The papers showed massive transfers, millions of dollars, being funneled through offshore accounts under shell company names I'd never heard of. My stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. I tried to confront Ethan about it, but he brushed me off, saying it was complicated business stuff and that I wouldn't understand. I wanted to believe him, but a voice in the back of my mind told me something wasn't right. From that moment, I started paying closer attention. I began noticing other discrepancies. Calls Ethan would abruptly end when I walked into the room, whispered conversations with Catherine that stopped the moment I appeared, and cryptic emails on his laptop. My unease grew with every passing day. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something from me. Then, one night, everything changed. Ethan and Catherine were in the living room, discussing something in hushed tones. I was upstairs, but their voices carried through the vents. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard Catherine say, "We need to handle the problem before it's too late," I froze. Ethan hesitated, his voice low but tense. "I don't like this, Mom. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Catherine snapped. "Maya's getting too close. If she finds out, it could ruin everything. The plan is already in motion." My blood ran cold. What plan? And why was I the problem? I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If they knew I was listening, I didn't know what they might do. I crept back to my bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities. I didn't have all the pieces yet, but one thing was clear. Ethan and Catherine were involved in something far more sinister than I'd ever imagined. And worse, they saw me as a threat to whatever it was. The realization hit me like a freight train. My husband, the man I had loved and trusted, was not who I thought he was. And his mother, who had always treated me like an outsider, now seemed like a genuine danger. I needed to figure out what they were hiding, and fast. But I also needed to protect myself. If they were willing to handle me, I couldn't afford to make a single mistake. The cracks in my perfect life weren't just cracks anymore. The foundation was crumbling, and I was standing in the middle of it, trying to survive. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to be a victim. Whatever they were planning, I was going to expose the truth and make sure they paid for what they'd done. The morning after I overheard Ethan and Catherine's chilling conversation, I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I avoided Ethan as much as possible, pretending everything was fine while my mind churned with questions. What were they hiding? How far would they go to keep their secret? I knew I needed answers, but I also knew I had to be careful. One wrong move could cost me my life. I decided to confide in the only person I trusted completely, Rachel Morgan, my best friend since college. Rachel was everything I wasn't at that moment: bold, grounded, and fiercely protective. She worked as a chef, and her practicality had always been a grounding force in my life. When I showed up at her restaurant after hours, she took one look at my pale face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, pulling me into the office at the back of the restaurant. I hesitated, unsure where to begin, but eventually, the words poured out. I told her everything about the money transfers, the whispered conversations, and what I'd overheard the night before. Rachel's face darkened as I spoke. "Maya, this is serious. They're not just keeping secrets, they're planning something dangerous." "I know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "But I don't know what to do. If I confront them, they'll know I'm onto them. And if I don't," my voice trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging in the air. Rachel leaned forward, her expression fierce. "We need to gather evidence. Whatever they're hiding, we need proof. Do you still have those financial documents?" I nodded. "I kept copies. But I don't know if it's enough." "Then we'll get more," she said firmly. "You're not doing this alone." Over the next few days, Rachel and I worked in secret. I started paying closer attention to Ethan's behavior, noting every suspicious call, every whispered conversation. Rachel suggested I reach out to a private investigator she knew, a man named Tom Hayes. He was a retired detective, and while I was hesitant to involve someone I didn't know, Rachel insisted he could help. When I met Tom at a quiet cafe on the other side of town, I immediately felt a sense of relief. He was in his 50s, with a calm demeanor that put me at ease. After I explained the situation, he nodded thoughtfully. "If what you're saying is true, they're laundering a significant amount of money. And if they're talking about handling you, it means you're a liability to them." "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, my stomach twisting. Tom pulled out a notepad, flipping through pages of notes I had given him. "Based on the documents you copied, at least $80 million. They're funneling it through shell companies and offshore accounts. It's a sophisticated operation." The number hit me like a punch to the gut. $80 million. How could Ethan and Catherine have built such an elaborate scheme without me knowing? And why had they involved me at all? Tom explained that using my name and clean financial record made their transactions look legitimate. I wasn't just a bystander, I was a pawn. "I can start digging," Tom said. "But you need to be careful. If they suspect you're onto them, they'll act fast." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made my heart race. Ethan came home late, as usual, his demeanor calm and collected. He kissed me on the cheek, acting as if nothing was wrong, and I fought the urge to flinch. How could he be so casual when I knew what he was capable of? Over the next week, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled when Ethan spoke to me, pretended to believe his lies, and acted as if nothing had changed. But inside, I was terrified. Rachel stayed by my side, helping me strategize and keeping me grounded. She even encouraged me to buy a small recording device and hide it in my purse.
Just in case, she said.
One evening, while Ethan was out, I decided to search his office again. My hands shook as I sifted through papers and opened drawers, careful not to disturb anything. That's when I found it, a folder labeled Personal. Inside were photos of me, taken without my knowledge. Some were recent, me leaving the grocery store, walking to work, sitting in the park. Each photo was marked with a date and time. My blood ran cold. But the most chilling item was a handwritten note, scrawled in Catherine's neat handwriting. Maya is becoming a problem. We need to move forward. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. They weren't just keeping secrets, they were planning to get rid of me. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they painted was horrifying. The next day, Catherine called me. Her voice was warm, almost too warm. Maya, darling, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? We need to clear the air. I knew it wasn't an invitation, it was a trap. But if I didn't go, they'd know I was onto them. And if I went, I might not come back. I had no choice. I had to go, but I wasn't going to walk in unprepared. I'll be there, I said, forcing a smile into my voice. As I hung up, I looked at Rachel, my hands trembling. I'm going to need your help. When Catherine invited me to dinner, I knew it wasn't an olive branch. It was a setup. My heart pounded as I prepared for the evening. I wasn't walking into that house blind. Rachel and I spent hours planning. She gave me a small wire to wear under my blouse, connected to my phone, which would record everything. Just keep calm, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. Whatever happens, remember, we'll get through this. That evening, I arrived at Catherine's house, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Austin. It looked beautiful, as always, pristine lawn, twinkling lights, and an air of affluence. But now, I saw it for what it was, a facade hiding something dark and sinister. Catherine greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maya, darling, I'm so glad you could come. Of course, I said, forcing my voice to sound cheerful. Inside, I was screaming. The dining room was set up like something out of a magazine, crystal glasses, expensive silverware, and a lavish spread of food. Ethan was already seated, pouring wine into 3 glasses. Maya, he said, flashing that same charming smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now it made my skin crawl. I sat down, trying to suppress the nausea rising in my stomach. The atmosphere was tense, but Catherine kept up the act, chatting about meaningless topics as if this were a normal family dinner. I nodded along, pretending to listen, while every fiber of my being was on high alert. Then, as Ethan handed me a glass of wine, I noticed it, a faint, chemical smell. My stomach twisted. This was it. This was how they planned to handle me. I pretended to sip, letting the wine touch my lips without swallowing. When Catherine turned to adjust her napkin, I poured a little into a nearby plant, careful to keep my movements subtle. Not thirsty? Ethan asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. I'm just pacing myself, I said, forcing a smile. Long day at work. As dinner progressed, I became increasingly uneasy. Catherine was too composed, her polite smile hiding something far more dangerous. Ethan, on the other hand, was fidgety, glancing at me every few minutes. The tension was suffocating. Halfway through the meal, I excused myself to the bathroom. Once inside, I locked the door and took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I activated my phone's recording feature, ensuring the wire was capturing everything. I needed proof, something concrete to take to the police. As I prepared to leave, I froze. Through the thin walls, I could hear Catherine and Ethan's voices in the dining room. She didn't drink it, Catherine hissed, her tone cold and angry. This is why we should have used the food. She's not stupid, Mom, Ethan replied, his voice low and strained. What if she suspects something? Catherine's response sent a chill down my spine. Then we'll force her to. Either way, we end this tonight. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely hold my phone. They weren't just planning to poison me. They were prepared to do whatever it took to finish the job.
I had to get out of there, now.
I climbed out of the bathroom window, the small edge scraping my arms and legs as I squeezed through. The fall wasn't far, but the impact sent a jolt of pain through my ankle. Ignoring it, I ran across the lawn, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached Rachel's car, parked discreetly down the street. Rachel's eyes widened as I climbed in, panting and shaking. "What happened?" "They tried to poison me," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I heard them. They were going to force me if I didn't drink it." We drove away in silence, my heart racing as I clutched the phone in my hand. I had the recording, proof of their plan to kill me. But even with the evidence, I knew this wasn't over. Ethan and Catherine weren't going to let me walk away without a fight. When Rachel and I got back to her apartment that night, I felt a mixture of fear and fury. They had tried to kill me, my own husband, and his mother. Any lingering doubts I had about Ethan's intentions were gone. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, knowing the recording was my only shot at justice. But I also knew I couldn't rest until they were stopped for good. Rachel stayed up with me as I played the recording over and over, each word solidifying the danger I was in. Catherine's cold, calculating voice was undeniable proof of their plan. When Ethan hesitated, she made it clear that eliminating me was a necessity. The thought of what could have happened if I had stayed at that table sent a shiver down my spine. The next morning, I called Tom Hayes, the private investigator. He agreed to meet us immediately. "Bring everything you have," he said. "We need to act fast." At Tom's office, I handed over the recording, the financial documents, and the photos I had found in Ethan's office. As he reviewed them, his expression grew darker. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "They're laundering $80 million, and they're using you as a cover. If this goes public, it'll bring down some powerful people." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice shaking. Tom leaned forward, his tone serious. "We take this to the authorities, but you need to be prepared. They'll come after you once they realize you've exposed them." Rachel squeezed my hand. "We'll handle it, Maya. You're not alone." Tom arranged a meeting with Detective Logan Bennett, a seasoned officer who had been investigating financial crimes in Austin. When I handed over the evidence, Logan listened to the recording with grim determination.
"This is solid," he said.
"We've been circling the Carter family for years, but this gives us exactly what we need." Over the next few days, the police moved quickly. They froze the accounts tied to Ethan's shell companies and gathered a task force to execute simultaneous arrests. I was placed under police protection, moving to a safe house while the operation unfolded. The thought of leaving Rachel behind terrified me, but she insisted I go. "Your safety comes first," she said firmly. The day of the arrests, I received updates from Detective Bennett. "We got Catherine at her charity office," he said. "She didn't see it coming. Ethan's another story. He put up a fight, but we've got him." I felt a rush of relief, but it was short-lived. That evening, I received a call from Bennett.
"We found something," he said.
"Catherine wasn't just targeting you. She had a contingency plan to frame Ethan if things went wrong. She left enough evidence to incriminate him, even if you didn't expose them." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Catherine had been willing to betray her own son to save herself. Their partnership wasn't built on trust. It was built on mutual exploitation. Their downfall was inevitable. With Ethan and Catherine in custody, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. I testified against them in court, recounting every painful detail of their betrayal. Seeing Ethan in the courtroom was like looking at a stranger. Gone was the charming man I had married. In his place was someone cold and unrecognizable. Catherine, sitting beside him, showed no remorse. If anything, she seemed annoyed that her plans had been disrupted. Both were convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and a litany of other charges. Ethan received 25 years in prison and Catherine, 30. Their empire crumbled, and the $80 million they had funneled was recovered, bringing relief to countless victims of their schemes. In the aftermath, I focused on healing. Rachel remained my constant support, encouraging me to channel my pain into something positive. I began volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who felt trapped in abusive or manipulative relationships. It wasn't easy revisiting my trauma, but knowing I could help others gave me strength. 1 year after the trial, I stood on the shores of Lady Bird Lake, reflecting on everything I had been through. The betrayal, the fear, the moments I thought I wouldn't survive. It had all brought me here, to a place of resilience and empowerment. I was no longer the naive woman who believed in Ethan's lies. I was someone stronger, wiser, and free. As the sun set over the water, I felt a profound sense of peace. My life had been shattered, but I had rebuilt it piece by piece. And as I walked away from the lake, I knew one thing for certain: I would never let anyone take my power away again.